Hello everybody and welcome back to Apple Gaming SE. This is news and opinions for January 21st through the 27th, 2024. New subs this week, I am up +5 to 74 subs. I can confirm that a channel named Timmy and TomTom has subscribed, so check out their channel for cat videos and Final Fantasy VII Remake videos. Going straight into the news, though, we are going to talk about gaming news first. So, Death Stranding's Director's Cut is launching on iPhone 15 Pro and Apple Silicon Macs starting January 30th. So I guess I was wrong. This is coming from Mac Rumors, by the way, but I guess I was wrong about 505 Games' announcement. Not only do we get the notice of a release date in early 2024 like I thought, but it turns out the game is actually being released very early in 2024, in 3 days' time, actually, on January 31st. Yes, and I got that sweet 50% pre-order discount, and I do plan on doing Death Stranding gameplay on the iPhone 15 Pro. Maybe a full playthrough, depending on how interesting the game is. Kojima and I have had a love-hate relationship with the Metal Gear Solid games. Regardless, I am excited to see it, and glad I could buy the game to support iPhone app and game development. Apple opens the App Store to game streaming services. This is coming from The Verge and from 9to5Mac. The Verge is admittedly not a site that I come across too often, but this is who I saw the story from first. Native game streaming apps are indeed coming in iOS 17.4, and that's great. I've been a long time Xbox guy, and I'll be happy to have access to these games with a native app. Browser gaming just feels a little bit too off for me, and generally I'm not a game streaming gamer, but I'm curious to see how bad the latency is. I have streamed a few games on Xbox using their Cloud Pass. Was it Game Pass Ultimate? Yeah, so I've streamed a few games on my PC to do it. And I've never really been interested in the Netflix gaming service, but I might give it a shot too. We'll see. There's speculation that they're probably going to make a native app for iPhone as well. Regardless, we as the consumers are getting more choices for gaming, and this is a worldwide change, so this may be partially related to the changes that Apple is making for the EU, but I am happy that we're getting it everywhere else. That all dovetails nicely into the next set of stories, which are all loosely related to Apple's App Store changes and iPhone changes in the EU. So after years off the Apple's App Store, Fortnite will reappear in the EU on the Epic's Game Store. This is coming from Apple Insider. The takeaway here for me is just the verbal floundering that Epic's CEO is railing on about. He said that, quote, "we'll continue to argue with the courts and regulators that Apple is breaking the law," end quote, on X Twitter. Now that Apple is allowing new app marketplaces and reducing fees, but Epic still isn't happy. We'll look at the fee structure in the next story. So Tim Sweeney, that's the Epic CEO, twice now has battled Apple in the legal realm instead of continuing to be a partner for Apple. And now twice is getting spanked. They lost their case in the US, and Apple is now in the process of suing them for $76 million in legal fees. Apple is altering their model of operating mobile apps, and Epic is on the losing end of that due to the new fee structure. So let's look at those fees. Now, keep in mind as we go through this, Epic has, since 2020, taken the position that they are leading the charge against Apple's profiteering schemes. That Epic is, in fact, fighting for smaller devs across the board. So Apple has announced their reduced commission structure. 9to5Mac broke this down really simply. That's why I'm going with their story. Summed up, Apple's new fee structure is like this. Apple's commissions are at 17% plus 3% if you're using Apple's in-app purchase system. That's down to 20% from 30%. Or if you're using a different pay method, that's 17% and 10% respectively. Well, the 10% comes from the small business developers. Small business developers will be paying 10% plus 3%, which is down from a flat 15%. So just to reiterate that a little bit, if you're not using Apple's in-app purchases, it's 17%. If you are not a small business developer, if you're a small business developer, it's 10%. So keep that in mind. If you're using in-app, you add 3%. Now, if you are a developer that has over 1 million downloads on your app and you're using a third party or one of these app marketplaces, as Apple calls them in their announcement presser, you will be forced to pay a €0.5 fee for the first time install of your app on a yearly basis. I think this means once you hit 1 million, you're going to have to pay, at least that is how people are interpreting it, you're going to have to pay 500,000 euros. So it's not like the U.S. progressive tax system where the U.S. taxes you up to a point, and then when you hit, $37,001, then you pay additional taxes on that $37,001 up to the next bracket. I think that it's across the board. At least that's the speculation right now. I haven't seen anybody clarify that. So that is to say, Apple is not going to fine you only starting at the 1 million and first app. It's once you hit 1 million downloads, then they start charging you €0.5 for every single app download you've had, or first time app download you've had for that year. I'm assuming it's a calendar year. It might be a fiscal year. That also has not been explicitly stated as far as I know. Now, in addition to that, if you are an operator of one of these new app marketplaces, this fee is automatically charged to you. You don't need to hit the 1 million download threshold. Apple anticipates that this is going to be less than 1% of developers who will need to pay this fee, so that's an important note there. Guess which percentage Epic falls into? That's right, Epic is going to be insta-taxed on this one. They are going to be bringing their Epic Game Store to iOS, and you know for a fact that Fortnite will be several times over 1 million downloads. In fact, a lot more than just several times, because to paint a picture for you, Fortnite had 650 million active users over the course of 2023. So they'll be paying Apple probably somewhere in the range of 325 million euros right out the gate. So this is indeed a big win for small developers, which is exactly why the EU has the Digital Markets Act in place. It's not done with the benefit of the megacorps in mind like Apple and Epic. So Apple is actually, whether they intended to or not, complying more with the spirit of the DMA laws by giving huge breaks to smaller devs. Or Epic can stick to the 30% Apple fee that they had before. Fortunately, Apple is magnanimous enough that they aren't taking that option away. So Epic has the choice of going back to the status quo that they seem to love so much that they want to go on and on about, and that they had in 2020, and just pay Apple their 30%, and that'll be that. Other App Store changes are coming to iOS 17.4 to the EU, and these are not going to have any meaningful financial impact on Apple's market position. So there's some other considerations. These stories I have two different stories, both coming from Apple Insider, and it's worth keeping in mind these kind of other aspects to how this is going to work, just to kind of position the prediction for Apple. Obviously, new things are going to come out of the woodwork as we go through the year, but as it stands right now, first, the fees that are placed on the app marketplaces is effectively a restriction. So only the big players like Epic, Microsoft, etc. are going to be worrying about these fees that they're paying to third-party marketplaces, or as a result of operating a third-party marketplace. That also means that developers who are in the larger end of the small developer or even medium-sized developers are going to need to pay if they want to run their own marketplace. This might be cost prohibitive, and therefore the status quo isn't likely going to change for quite some time. Due to these factors, there isn't likely going to be a massive market share change or financial upheaval for Apple in Europe. Ultimately, all of Europe, including non-EU countries, I presume, also makes up only about 6% of the entirety of App Store revenue. Changes to App Store policies aren't going to change it in the US. It isn't going to change this, for us here in the US or anywhere else in the world. So for now, Apple's financial standings will remain healthy. And we'll see how that shakes out in the coming years as Apple battles the U.S. Department of Justice regarding anti-competitive behavior. Note that the Department of Justice has said that they have fully planned on bringing a case against Apple this year. It is currently expected to hit in March is when it will start. Browsers like Chrome and Firefox can abandon WebKit in the EU with iOS 17.4. Again, from Apple Insider. Soon, the EU iOS users will have more diversity in their web browsers. Third-party web browsers will be able to use custom browser engines, and not everyone will be forced into using WebKit. While I'm perfectly fine using WebKit, and I also like Firefox's Gecko rendering, pretty much anything that isn't Chromium I'm happy with. I think that Google's decisions effectively dictate the entirety of how the web operates, just kind of as a de facto standard, and that's from advertising to handling pop-ups and tracking mechanisms and just, yeah, all of it. If Google decides they're going to put this into Chromium, everybody else who has a Chromium-based browser, so that's, Brave, Opera, Microsoft Edge, I mean, you name it, there's tons of them out there. They all are going to be getting those same features, whether or not it's necessarily beneficial to the users of the web. Or at least I should say the consumers, because there's a lot of users who are not consumers, right? There's business people, and so it's a whole thing. But for me personally, I like WebKit, I like Firefox, and I just don't want to use any Google services if I can avoid it. That's just me. Apple is also enhancing reports about what it knows about EU users in iOS 17.4, coming from Apple Insider again. The short version of this is that the users and law enforcement with valid reason can request more specific details from Apple. Apple is also creating an API for account data transfers and to allow exporting of data collected by Apple. Speaking of privacy, here in the U.S., the defense and intelligence services are buying troves of data about Americans on the open market. So if you follow cybersecurity or online the online privacy subculture, this will come as no surprise to you, as it's basically been a admission by the U.S. for years that this occurs. And actually back in October, the Department of Homeland Security actually admitted this outright. Going back a number of weeks ago, Senator Ron Wyden had outed a practice that Apple and other companies had been quietly forced into doing data collection by the defense and intelligence arms of the U.S. government. Now the good senator is putting more pressure on these parts of the U.S. government which have been buying data about U.S. citizens and non-U.S. citizens from data brokers. This is without citizens' consent and should be stopped. Only if and when a person or persons is suspected of breaking the law or endangering others should the government, in any capacity, be able to acquire information that isn't public knowledge. The FTC agrees, since they took action against this kind of data collection earlier this month. That is my opinion. Back to our regularly scheduled news. Vision Pro sales are estimated at 160 to 180,000 units sold over the first 3 days, and Netflix's CEO saying that the Vision Pro market is too insignificant to bother with. These two stories are coming from 9to5Mac and Apple Insider. And Apple could be on track, though, to sell 500,000 Vision Pro units by the end of 2024. Rumors have it that Apple expected to sell 400,000, and if, in fact, 180,000 were sold in the first 3 days, then you're looking about over 40% of the supposedly expected number of unit sales. So over the course of the year, analysts are saying it could be 500,000. Apple internally supposedly only expects 400,000. That said, shipping times for pre-orders leveled out over the course of 48 hours, so the demand seems to have tapered off. We'll see how this new technology market for Apple shakes out in the coming months. This may indeed just be an early adopters kind of market for now, like it could be a hobby project like the Apple TV used to be. Netflix has placed their bets on the market. Their CEO is going so far as to say that the market is too insignificant for Netflix to invest developing an app for it. Apple is going to get TSMC's first 2nm chips. This is coming from Mac Rumors. And Digitimes, they are reporting that while the 3nm process, just like the 3nm process, Apple will be the first company to get their hands on the 2nm process node. I don't think we'll see quite the same level of performance jump from the 3nm to 2nm as we did from 5 to 3, but I believe this will be a crucial component to getting a next-generation version of whatever Apple's Vision products are going to be, a Vision Air or a Vision SE, whatever you want to call it. Especially as people are starting to speculate on an AR glasses style project. If that turns out to be true in time, then yes, a even more efficient set of SoCs will be needed. Apple has won an early victory against the spyware maker NSO Group in a U.S. court. The NSO Group, the company that created the Pegasus spyware and specifically targeted Apple's products with it, requested that Apple be forced to sue them within Israel. That's NSO Group's home country. A U.S. judge decided that, quote, in all respects, end quote, Apple's case will not be dismissed from U.S. jurisdiction. The court also ruled that Apple had adequately alleged that NSO had violated the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act and California's unfair competition law. This isn't an outright win for Apple, so much that it means Apple can pursue legal actions against the NSO Group to continue ensuring the security of their products and infrastructure, and by extension, their customers. Apple has snagged another iPhone record, topping Chinese sales for the first time ever, coming from 9to5Mac. And finally, keeping in theme with last week's story of Apple's win in worldwide sales and big profits in Korea, we are turning to China. Despite some stiff regulations and rumored unfair actions by the Chinese government, at least unfair as we Westerners would define it, Apple has the largest single brand market share at 17.3%. That doesn't mean that Apple has an overall empowered position within that market, especially since Huawei's Phoenix-like rise from the ashes of U.S. sanctions has propelled them into 4th place in final quarter sales of last year. Regardless, congrats to Apple for their hard work on such an uphill market. That is it for news this week. I hope you have enjoyed it. If you have not already, please like and subscribe. Us small-time YouTubers need all the help we can get, and I appreciate each and every one of you who does so. I look forward to seeing you all in the next News and Opinions video. Take care now. Bye-bye.